Hello and welcome. My name is Nessa. I am a fantasy variety streamer and an aspiring voice artist, but something that you might not know about me is that I have a very large fondness for literature. So, if you will have me, I would like to read Robin Hood together. Does that sound good? If you have the book, you can read along with me. Otherwise, grab a snack, grab a drink and a blanket, settle in and get comfy, and let's read Robin Hood together. Let's begin with the introduction of the legend of Robin Hood. The legend of Robin Hood, England's most daring and loved outlaw, emerged from the mists of history almost 800 years ago. Stories about Robin first appeared in ancient ballads and poems. They told how Robin and his merry men of Sherwood Forest fought for justice against tyrants and stole from the rich to help the poor. The legends brought to life Robin's sweetheart Maid Marian and his band of fellow outlaws. They included such fearless men of honour as the gentle giant Little John, noble Will Scarlet, the ballad singer Alan Adale, Midge the Miller, and jovial Friar Tuck. But Robin had three all-powerful enemies: the cruel and greedy Sheriff of Nottingham, his right-hand man, Sir Guy of Gisborne, and Prince John, the treacherous brother of King Richard the Lionheart. Only Robin and his courageous band stood between those three traitors and a cunning plot to steal the throne of England. Chapter 1: Outlaw. The arrow from young Robin Hood's bow arched high into the blue sky above Sherwood Forest. At last it began to slow and sink towards the ground again. The fate of that one arrow would change Robin's life forever and launch one of old England's most famous legends. That sunny morning in the ancient forest, Robin had been walking hand in hand with Maid Marian, his childhood sweetheart. A happier couple you could not have found in all England. Spring had sprung, and bursting buds had turned the winter forest into a wild world of the greenwoods. Birds sang joyously from every tree. The royal deer were grazing on the new season's lush grass. Robin, just 19 years old, and Marian, 2 years younger, were laughing and talking together as they walked happily back towards the small village of Locksley, where they lived. They spotted 4 men beside the track. Robin recognised them as the Sheriff of Nottingham's foresters. Their job was to patrol the forest, making sure no one stole any of the king's deer. These men were enjoying a breakfast of bread and cheese. Robin knew it was dangerous to meddle with the sheriff's men. Their sheriff had become a powerful man since King Richard the Lionheart had gone away to fight in the Holy Wars. Now he supported Richard's treacherous brother, Prince John, a man who wanted the throne of England for himself. Robin and Marian simply wished the men a good day and passed on by, but the sheriff's men were in good spirits and thought they would have some sport with the couple. "You're not old enough to carry a weapon like that," laughed one of the foresters, pointing to the great bow around Robin's shoulders and the quiver of arrows dangling at his waist. "You're but a child." Robin, a spirited, hot-blooded youth, should have ignored the remark, but his pride was hurt. "I am a better archer than you'll ever be," he snapped angrily. "What's your name, boy?" asked one of the foresters, starting to laugh at him. "You'd be better off at home, drinking your mother's milk." Robin's blood boiled at the rudeness of the man. "I'm Robin of Locksley, and I'll bet I can shoot a better arrow than any of you," he replied boldly. "That's a boast that could cost you your life," said the man, looking around for a target. He spotted a deer with fierce, proud antlers grazing in the far distance. Now he set a terrible trap for Robin. "See that large deer?" he said with a sneering smile. "I'll bet you a gold coin that you couldn't bring it down with a single arrow." Robin knew that all the deer in Sherwood belonged to the king. He also knew that to kill or steal one was a crime that a man could be hanged for, yet his youthful pride and anger blinded him to the dangers. Robin reached for his bow, a beautiful homemade weapon of the finest yew wood. Then he took an arrow from his quiver and notched it onto the bowstring. Raising the bow with his left hand, he took aim and pulled back the bowstring until it touched his ear. "No, Robin," cried Marion suddenly. "You mustn't do it. It's a trap. They'll hang you." Robin hesitated for a moment, but then another of the foresters insulted him again. "Oh, so you're going to listen to a silly little girl, are you?" said the man. "Do you always hide behind her skirts?" Robin was furious, and before he knew it, he had released the bowstring. Twang! The arrow sped on its way, high into the sky. Robin's aim was true. When the arrow whistled to earth again, it struck the deer a deadly blow. "Ha!" cried Robin. "What do you think of that for a shot? The gold coin is mine." "That shot will cost you more than a gold coin," laughed the forester. "When the sheriff hears you've killed one of the king's deer, there will be a price on your head." "But you made a bet," said Robin. "You owe me a gold coin." "I owe you nothing," roared the man. "You were fool enough to shoot at the king's deer, so you will pay, probably with your life." "Arrest him," ordered another of the men. Robin shouted at Marion, telling her to run home. Then he darted into the forest. The sheriff's men gave chase, shooting several arrows at him. It was an arrow whistling past his head that forced Robin to turn and shoot back in self-defense. He took careful aim. Robin didn't want to hit one of the sheriff's men. He only wanted to frighten them off. But just as he released the arrow, he lost his footing in the grass. The arrow struck one of his pursuers squarely in the chest, killing him instantly. Now, Robin was truly running for his life. Not only had he killed one of the king's deer, he had also killed one of the sheriff's foresters. Robin's life would never be the same again. He was now an outlaw. Chapter 2. The Great Oak Tree. Robin ran until he was nearly exhausted. The sheriff's men had long given up the chase. Sherwood Forest covered a huge area of more than 100,000 acres. It could be a frightening place. Few travellers dared to enter it because it was known to be a hiding place for outlaws. In summer, the greenwood hung thickly over the tracks that crisscrossed the forest. Any traveller who was bold enough to enter the forest could see no more than a few yards in front of him. Robin, however, knew the forest very well. It was his childhood playground. He knew its tracks and ways better than any man, and knew exactly where he was going. That morning, Robin headed for the safest place he could think of. Right in the middle of the forest stood a gigantic oak tree. He had sought shelter in it as a child during games of hide-and-seek, and he knew that the Sheriff of Nottingham's men would never find him there. Robin reached the great oak by evening, and at last he felt happier. The tree was like an old friend to him. He climbed up and slipped into a deep bed of leaves, formed where 3 large branches joined the tree trunk. It was as comfortable as any feather bed. Robin felt tired and lonely as he watched the last light of day disappear. "I cannot change what has happened," he thought sadly, as squirrels played in the boughs above him. "What is done. I killed in anger and youthful temper, and now I must pay the price." He knew he could no longer return home to his village. As he slipped into a troubled sleep that evening, his last thoughts were of Marian. He was missing her already. Even as Robin fell asleep, the Sheriff of Nottingham was deciding his fate. The foresters had returned to Nottingham Castle and reported what Robin had done. They made no mention of why he had shot a deer. The sheriff was wearing a purple robe and cap, a great gold chain of office around his neck, and a shining broadsword at his waist. He was having a supper of roasted venison, lamb chops, roast beef, pig's trotters, and a mountain of different vegetables. He didn't like to be disturbed while eating. "Hang the man," he ordered, stuffing another piece of venison into his mouth and rubbing his great fat stomach. "He escaped us," said one of the soldiers nervously. "Then go and find him," snarled the sheriff. "Bring him back in irons and hang him. Now leave me in peace to eat my supper." "He vanished into Sherwood Forest," said the second soldier rather quietly. The sheriff knew full well the dangers of going into Sherwood Forest after outlaws. He was frightened of setting foot in the place. 6 outlaws hidden in the greenwood could outwit a small army of soldiers. "Right," he said, losing his patience. "Put a reward of £200 on the lad's head, dead or alive. Some peasant will bring him in to use us for the money. But I'd rather him taken alive, so I can hang him from the battlements as a lesson to others. Now get out of my sight. My meal is getting cold." The next morning the sheriff's men nailed notices to tree along the tracks leading into Sherwood Forest. It wasn't long before Robin found one. He read it. "Wanted, Robin Hood of Locksley, for murder of a sheriff's man and killing one of the king's deer. Reward £200. Chapter 3. A Lonely Home in Sherwood Forest. Robin laid low in Sherwood Forest for the next few months, hardly ever straying from the great oak. Not once did he see a party of Sheriff Nottingham's soldiers searching for him. From the safety of his tree he watched them pass below him. The sheriff's men never found a trace of him. Marian, of course, knew his hiding place. She had played in the woods with him as a child, and guessed where he would be. In the months ahead, she brought him bread and cheese when she could. But Marian soon had to stop seeing Robin. The sheriff discovered that she was Robin's sweetheart, and his soldiers began to follow her everywhere, in case she should lead them to Robin. Even without Marian's help, Robin ate well in the forest. He knew he might as well be hanged for killing one deer as 3. So whenever his larder was empty, he killed another deer for food. He was never short of water either. There was a small stream of clear, ice-cool water flowing beside his leafy home. Robin wasn't completely alone. He knew there were other outlaws in the forest, people escaping the sheriff's cruel and unfair justice, and it wasn't long before he met one of them. Robin had set off one morning to explore some of his childhood haunts in the forest. He hadn't gone far when he had to cross a river. He knew the place well. Many years earlier, a huge oak tree had fallen across the river and the trunk had made a bridge. When Robin reached the river, he found the tree bridge still there. A giant of a man was approaching it from the other side. There was only room for one to cross the river on the tree trunk. "Stand back, lad," shouted the stranger. "Let the better and stronger man cross first." "In that case," said Robin boldly, "you had better let me pass first." "You're nothing but a child," replied the man. "Now stand aside, I don't want to have to hurt you." If there was one thing that annoyed Robin, it was to be called a child. He took out his bow and warned the man to stand back. "Watch out, youngster," the big man growled. "If you shoot that arrow, I'll tan your hides until it's the colour of a red squirrel. Besides, only a coward would shoot a man unarmed, except for an oak staff." Robin saw that the man's only weapon was a quarterstaff, a long, thick pole cut from a tree. He immediately put down his bow. "I'll not be called a coward," he cried. "I'll cut myself a quarterstaff to fight you fairly." Robin disappeared into the undergrowth and returned a few moments later with a thick staff about 6 feet long. The stranger was now standing on the tree trunk in the middle of the river, waiting for Robin with both hands on his quarterstaff. Robin gripped his own staff tightly. Then he leapt onto the tree trunk and advanced. Chapter 4. Little John. For a long moment the 2 men stared at each other as they balanced themselves on the tree trunk. Then the stranger made the first attack, lashing out viciously with his staff. Robin was not prepared for the blow. It clipped him on the head. "Ha!" laughed the man. "My next blow will send you sailing down the stream." Robin had been surprised by the speed and power of the blow that hit him, but he was ready for the next one. He ducked as the 2 stabs met with a great crack above his head. Both men advanced to fight at close quarters. To and fro they went, attacking and defending. Each blow that struck home had the other man teetering on the edge of falling into the river. Soon both were bleeding from several wounds. Yet, despite the stranger being far taller and broader than Robin, the fight was fairly equal, and the contest went on. After 2 hours of fierce battle on the tree trunk, they agreed to a short rest to have a drink of water. Then they set to again. The day wore on and still there was no victor. "Are you ready to give up, stranger?" gasped Robin as evening approached. "Never," replied the man, along with another whistling swing of his staff. Robin was sure the man was tiring. He advanced for a final attack, assaulting him with bringing down his staff with the very last of his own strength. The blow should have broken the man's head, but he was ready for it. He swerved to the side and ducked down. Robin's blow missed the mark completely, and he was thrown off balance. He had almost recovered his foothold when the man delivered a slicing blow that knocked his legs from beneath him, and with a desperate cry he tumbled headfirst into the river. "How now?" "Ha ha!" laughed the stranger when Robin bobbed to the surface. "Now will you let me pass first?" Even Robin, still spluttering for breath, saw the funny side of it. He knew he had been beaten by a cleverer man, and he was ready to admit it too. "If you don't give me a hand, I shall float all the way to Nottingham," he laughed. The stranger hurried back along the bank and put out a hand for Robin to catch. "Generally I wouldn't do this for any man," he said, "but you fought like a lion." "I doubt there is any other man on earth who could have tipped me into the water as you did," replied Robin, gratefully accepting the hand. As soon as Robin had dried himself, he asked the man's name. "Men call me Little John," he replied, puffing out his huge chest and stretching himself to his full height of close to 6 feet and 6 inches. Robin laughed again. A fine name for one so small. That evening they returned to the great oak and took care of their battle wounds. Then they roasted some forest rabbits that Robin had caught the day before and had a fine feast. Little John was the first of what became known as Robin's merry men. Next to join the band were Will Stutely and David of Doncaster, 2 good fellows who had fallen on hard times and been outlawed. In the months that followed, others joined them. Most were outlaws for one reason or another. Many of them had a sheriff's price on their heads. Some were wanted for killing the king's deer, but most were just poor people who had been forced to steal. It was the only way they could feed their starving families, who had been robbed by the Sheriff of Nottingham's cruel henchmen. Others had been robbed of their lands by the sheriff's men. Some had been forced to sell their land to pay the sheriff's high taxes. In that first year in Sherwood, Robin gathered together some 30 outlaws, and by Robin's 20th birthday there were 50 men living in and around the Great Oak. They were united by a hatred of injustice. Robin was still young, but the others, some older than him, chose him as their leader because none but Little John could match Robin's fighting and archery skills, nor his bravery. Robin chose Little John as his right-hand man. Robin also made everyone swear never to harm a child or maid, wife or widow. They also had to vow to fight injustice and cruelty wherever they saw it. And they promised no favours to the rich and the powerful, be they sheriffs, barons, knights, monks, or church friars. If any of those wealthy men had stolen from the poor, well, they would be treated as common robbers. Robin himself promised that any riches they took from these powerful robbers would be shared out among the poor and hungry. Another thing all were agreed upon was that any traveller passing through Sherwood should be stopped and questioned. If they were wealthy and couldn't explain where their money had come from, then Robin and his men would take possession of it. Robin set up a series of watch trees on all the main tracks through Sherwood Forest. Each member of the band took it in turn to spend a day hidden in one of these trees, watching the comings and goings in the forest. Nothing and nobody moved in Sherwood without Robin knowing about it. One day Robin was taking his turn in one of the watch trees, when a man dressed in an expensive-looking red cloak and carrying an ancient quarterstaff in his hand wandered down the track on foot. Robin, his trusty quarterstaff at the ready, dropped from the branch where he had been hiding among the thick greenery. "Stop where you are!" he shouted. Chapter 5. Will Scarlet. The stranger didn't seem in the least concerned to see Robin appear so suddenly from the tree. "Why should I stop?" he said, continuing to walk towards him. "Because you look rather too wealthy in that red cloak," said Robin. "Unless you can prove you came by your wealth honestly, you'll have to pay to pass by." The man ignored Robin's warning. "I have no money," he said, and continued to walk on. Robin insisted that the man stop. "Then I'll have to kill you," said the stranger, gripping his staff tightly. "Put your staff away," said Robin, looking at the man's slender frame. "I could cut you in two like a barley straw." "Then come and do it," said the stranger. "You'll find me the toughest straw you ever tried to cut." That was enough to raise Robin's temper. He lashed out at the man with his staff. The stranger simply pushed the staff away and struck the outlaw a cracking blow with his own staff. Now the two men faced each other like angry bulls and advanced to attack. And what a fight it was! Soon after it began, Little John, Will Stutely, and David of Doncaster arrived. None had ever seen such a battle. "I think Robin will have a headache after this fight," said Little John. "He's met his match." They continued fighting for an hour or more before the stranger caught Robin a fearful blow on the head. He fell to the ground, almost unconscious. Little John ran forward. "Stop the fight, stranger. Robin is done for." "A plague on you, Little John," cried Robin, recovering his wits again. "I'm not finished yet." "Come, Robin, admit it," said Little John. "You've been beaten by me with my staff, and now you've been beaten by this man. Admit defeat." "Never!" cried Robin, finally getting to his feet and rubbing his sore head. The two men came together again in an explosion of blows. But once more the stranger got the better of Robin and knocked him to the ground. Little John and Will were laughing now. "Robin, you may be the best archer in the land," said Little John, "but the staff is not your favourite weapon. Admit it." "All right, my friends," said Robin, smiling at the same time as rubbing his head. "I yield to the stranger. So tell me, who is it that has given me such a sore head?" "They call me Will Scarlet," said the man. "And who are you?" As soon as Robin revealed who he was, Will Scarlet shook his opponent's hand. By now there were few people in the forest who hadn't heard of Robin and his good deeds. "A man with such skill with a staff," said Robin, "should come and join us. What say you, Will Scarlet?" "The sheriff's men killed my family and threw me out of my house," he replied. "So I shall be pleased to join you, Robin." "Welcome, Will Scarlet," said Will Stutely. "Come, Will," said Little John. "There's a feast of the king's deer waiting for us back at the Great Oak." Over the next few months, Robin's camp at the Great Oak grew and grew. Robin still slept in the Great Oak, but now he had built a roof above his nesting place to keep out the rain. Beneath the tree, several huts made of oak frames and covered with bark had been built for others to sleep in. There was also a long, rough-hewn oak table that Little John had built. Robin's entire band of men could sit around it. Robin's men all dressed themselves in green tunics. The colour was called Lincoln green, a colour that matched the green of the summer leaves exactly. Close to the great table, a large fireplace had been dug into the ground. This was where the great joints of venison were roasted. At the very base of the tree was a special place where Robin stood when he talked to his men. It was also the place where any passing minstrel could sing. And how Robin's men liked to sing! They weren't known as Robin's merry men for nothing. And so ends part 1 of my Robin Hood reading. I hope you enjoyed it, delicious soul, and I will see you in part 2. Goodbye for now.